Welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Bethan. I'm Business Me Programme Manager at the Lord Mayor's Appeal and the organiser of today's webinar, Navigating Grief in the Workplace.
My name is Erin. I'm a clinical psychologist. I work across the NHS and charitable sector, and I am the founder and director of the Loss Foundation. So we are a cancer bereavement charity. So we support adults who've had a loved one die from cancer, and only in the last 2 years gone from being a regional to a national charity, but increasingly providing more training in the workplace for different organisations. And I guess what we bring to that is sort of 15 years of supporting people who are grieving and hearing, exactly what they're struggling with and how they've been well supported or not well supported at work, which allows us to really, I guess, go into organisations and try and help them feel more comfortable and confident in talking about this topic and in supporting people with this topic. And it's a real pleasure to be here.
You're both a practicing clinical psychologist and also director of the Loss Foundation, and you have this kind of unique perspective of working closely with individuals, but you also support organisations, so you can offer a bit of insight on both of those. So firstly, considering that you are a clinical psychologist, can you share with us maybe a bit of the importance of evidence-based research when developing support systems for grieving employees? And also, can you touch a little bit on the potential costs to organisations if they fail to adequately support grieving employees? So things like absenteeism or presenteeism that we may see.
Yeah, sure. Well, we're very much an evidence-based kind of organisation. We're genuinely really interested in what people actually struggle with when they're grieving. And if you say the word, grief, people will automatically think of sadness, which of course comes with it, but it's such a broad experience. And I think it's really helpful if you're going to be providing training to knowing a little bit more about what people are actually struggling with, because it is so broad. And then, of course, knowing a little bit more about what actually helps. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and so there's typically lots of different kind of training options. Sometimes, actually, it's really helpful to go in and help organisations learn a little bit more about what grief looks like and how that might impact somebody when they come back to work, struggling with concentration, productivity, things that maybe typically I found really easy to do now I'm struggling with, or maybe I'm really experiencing a lot of anxiety or low mood, and so we've done a lot of research into what it looks like, and then what's helpful, and yeah, there are different trainings for that. Sometimes one of our most popular trainings is actually helping people a little bit, like I said before, getting more comfortable or confident talking about this. Typically it is something that can be a bit of a taboo, like you mentioned in the introduction. So what are the practical skills that can help people kind of do that a little bit more comfortably? And how can we measure if that's actually working? Of course, it's wonderful to provide some support, but even more helpful to make sure that it's doing what we're sort of aiming for it to do. And one of the best ways of doing that is asking your employees directly, what is it that you need, and has it helped with that, and what else is missing? Of course, the ideal scenario is it being as personalised as possible. But directly asking people what they need and how it helps. So measuring where you can in any way, be it quantitatively or even qualitatively, getting some kind of open feedback. And gosh, there's so much research, as for your second part of the question, into the impact of sort of going back to work and not being supported. And you touched on that beautifully with some of those statistics at the beginning. But, to put it really simply, most of us spend most of our time at work. So if you've gone through this huge life-changing experience and now you're back at a workplace that hasn't really acknowledged or supported you in the way that you need, it's really hard to turn up. And so some people don't turn up, they might even get signed off sick. Or if they are able to turn up, that word you mentioned there, they might not be fully present. And actually, they just might not value being at work so much themselves. So again, they might leave the workplace, have a bit of resentment, what have you. It's a wonderful, compassionate, moral move to support someone when they're going through this, but it's also a brilliant business move. People who feel really well supported tend to stay longer, feel valued by the company, enjoy the job more, etc., etc. There's a whole wealth of research on that. And again, lovely to hear when people are doing it really well. And what I would argue, for any companies that think, oh, we're not doing this as well as we might be able to, often it's little tweaks. It's not having to adopt these ginormous new approaches. It really is little tweaks that can be passed on either in sort of adapting policies or in some trainings. So it is possible to create big change with small little tweaks as well.
Thank you, Erin. I feel like you've touched on so much just in that brief answer, but yeah, taking that one, recognizing that one size doesn't fit all. I think the personalized approach is so important. And yeah, I think, this topic has historically been seen as kind of a nicety or a nice extra thing to have, but we're seeing increasingly that there is a huge business case for this, particularly as we touched on that younger generation who, as you say, just doesn't really put up with poor support anymore. Thankfully, they're a bit more, feel a bit more confident to ask for what they need. So I'm sure it's only going to get more like that over time.
One of the things that came up quite a bit was that not everybody is ready to talk, and that things like grief cafes will be fantastic for those that are ready to share their experiences and their stories and explore, talk about the memories of those loved ones. But I'm wondering if anyone of our panelists has some experience around how employers can support those who maybe aren't ready to talk yet, and what things outside of specifically talking about the experience could be valuable or supportive in a workplace environment. I don't know if any of our panelists have got some thoughts on that.
I do.
Go ahead, Erin.
It's such an important point. There is a readiness to being able to kind of turn towards grief, and there's no time point for that, which is why I think it's really important that support is also about sort of planting some seeds. I know that when we provide sort of trainings, we're very mindful of that there's lots of things we share there that will help someone at an individual level, but it doesn't mean it's for now. So we do lots there about how can I look after myself when I'm really struggling. How can I look after colleagues and those around me when they're struggling? What might I be able to say that's helpful rather than sort of meaningless platitudes? So sort of helping at an individual team and a more sort of systemic level. But it doesn't mean you have to do all of those immediately. Lots of that is sort of planting seeds that might be immediately helpful, but might also put things in people's pockets for times that they feel more ready to sort of turn towards some of those kind of things. And we try and make it practical, because sometimes people want things they can take and try and practice and do and what have you. But we're all for kind of planting seeds rather than assuming that everybody's at a sort of ready level to kind of go towards talking or sharing. That's a very individual kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I like that idea of, I think it's, for me, that's kind of the golden thread. We've talked about those throughout, but each of you, when you spoke, talked about this kind of personalization. So I think meeting people where they are, and I think, just respecting that not everyone will want to talk about it. And that's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes it is, of some changes we might want to make to our culture, but there's lots of reasons that people might never want to talk about their grief. It can be cultural, it can be personality, it can be, this just isn't something I talk about with my colleagues. So yeah, I've had this question quite a bit as well, like, how do I convince someone to talk about their grief? And I wonder if that's maybe the wrong question in this case. It's more about respecting people's preferences.